Again, welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro song was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. All right, sorry I had to do that twice. Let me see how many comments are like, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, idiot. We can't hear you, idiot. Let's go through that really quickly. Oh, what? It's messing with me typing again, telling me I'm not subbed. Yeah, it's unsubbing you. So I deliberately set up this podcast so that you cannot comment unless you are a sub. So YouTube is continuously unsubscribing you. So you're going to have to resubscribe. Because I know you're subscribed. I know you didn't deliberately unsubscribe. So yeah, I had over the last week, I would just see 6 people unsubscribe in an hour. YouTube is definitely, doing some. Yeah, this even my camera's looking kind of weird. How do I? It's definitely not that, and definitely some jackass changed my symbol to some Thundercats, so I got to change that too. Avatar, Unreal. All right, my camera, I have a blue, something's going on weird that I need to adjust. Oh, for Christ's sake. All right, that's a little bit annoying. Not quite that. And not quite that. Wow, this is not ideal. Yeah, I have it about as dialed in as I can. So all right, I guess that's okay. Unreal. All right, it's better now. It's all better now. It's all better now. Unreal. Well, I got 14 comments. All right, hold on. Let me. Hey, penitent lizard. It did that to you too. Yeah, this is why I deliberately set it up to catch YouTube doing it. Yep. We actually did a remote viewing on that. I said in December it was going to happen, and I was pretty cocky about it. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'm pretty sure I fixed it. Yep. Hey, let's. Sorry, I'm just going through this quickly. Okay. I do make fun of blue-haired people all the time. Or wear a blue wig. Yeah. Wait, out of sync. Am I out of sync? Am I out of sync? Yeah, kind of looks kind of weird. It's probably because I'm recording 4K, maybe? Maybe. Okay. All right. All right. I have a gigantic amount of stuff to get through. So I'm just going to get started and then we can. It's been, I took 2 weeks off from work, but I've been doing nothing but this work and I'm exhausted. So it's not fixed. Okay. Yeah. Okay. trying to think what else I have to say, because I actually just went through a novel that I wrote like 10 years ago and just did one last editing pass, and now I'm doing the covers. So I expect that to come out by the end of the month, my first novel. But okay, all right, let us get started. All right, just bear with me here. What was this thing? Okay. Interdimensional Spillover. Cryptids at the Nexus of Folklore, Metaphysics, and Physics. Cryptids, creatures whose existence is suggested but unproven by science, occupy a unique space in human culture. From the towering Bigfoot of North American forests to the ominous Mothman of West Virginia, tales of mysterious beasts have persisted for generations. Dismissed by skeptics as myths or hoaxes, yet fervently supported by believers, cryptids straddle the boundary between folklore and reality. Typically studied as part of cryptozoology, the search for hidden animals, cryptids are often explained in conventional terms as undiscovered primates, misidentified wildlife, or fabrications. However, an intriguing and speculative hypothesis has gained traction in certain circles that some cryptids might be interdimensional spillovers, crossing into our world from parallel dimensions or planes of existence. In other words, what if Bigfoot, Mothman, and their ilk are not native to our reality at all, but transient visitors from another realm? This podcast explores this hypothesis through a scholarly lens, integrating insights from three distinct fields: folklore studies, metaphysics, and physics. Folklore studies provide context on how cryptid legends function as modern mythology and social narratives. Metaphysics, particularly the philosophical and esoteric concepts of multiple planes or possible worlds, offers frameworks for conceiving realities beyond the visible. Physics contributes theories or higher dimensions of parallel universes that, while speculative, ground the idea of interdimensional travel in scientific discourse. By weaving together these perspectives, we aim to examine whether the interdimensional hypothesis of cryptids can be articulated in a coherent theoretical framework. We will analyze notable case studies, Bigfoot, Mothman, and others, evaluating how well the spillover theory explains their mysterious behaviors and cultural impact. The tone throughout will remain scholarly and evidence-based, though we will allow room for reasoned speculation given the topic's extraordinary nature. Structurally, we're going to start with a literature review of each discipline's relevant contributions, folklorists' interpretations of cryptids as cultural phenomena, metaphysical and spiritual notions of other dimensions, and scientific theories of multiverses and extra-dimensional space. Next, we outline a theoretical framework that synthesizes these insights, defining what an interdimensional spillover might entail and how it could be investigated. In the case study analysis section, we delve into Bigfoot, Mothman, and a selection of other cryptids, such as the chupacabra and phenomena from window areas like Skinwalker Ranch, to see if interdimensional hypotheses shed light on their lore and reported behavior. And then we'll kind of have a discussion that follows, examining the implications of this hypothesis, its strengths, challenges, and what it reveals about our need to explain the unexplainable. Finally, the conclusion reflects on the value of interdisciplinary approaches to mysteries like cryptids, acknowledging that while the interdimensional spillover idea remains unproven, exploring it can enrich our understanding of both the unknown and the cultures that grapple with it. By integrating folklore, metaphysics, and physics, this podcast does not claim to prove that cryptids are interdimensional beings. Rather, it aims to critically explore how this hypothesis can be framed and what insights can emerge from treating cryptid stories as more than mere superstition, possibly as hints of a reality more complex than modern science typically allows. In doing so, we tread a fine line between scholarly analysis and imaginative conjecture, echoing the dual nature of cryptids themselves, creatures at once of fact and folklore, of this world and perhaps beyond it. So let's start with folklore studies. Cryptids as cultural phenomena. Cryptids have long been a subject of folklore, legend, and their narratives evolving with the cultures that recount them. Folklorists approach creatures like Bigfoot and Mothman not necessarily as biological entities, but as cultural artifacts. Okay. Symbols laden with meaning, born from specific historical and social contexts. Modern cryptid lore can be seen as a form of contemporary mythology or urban legend, serving many of the same functions as traditional folklore. As scholar Peter Dendel observes, popular interest in cryptozoology surged in the late 20th century through a publishing frenzy of cryptid guides and the rise of the internet facilitating story sharing. Dendel's analysis situates the emotional commitment to cryptids in a broader context of tension between popular and elite perspectives. Historically, tales of hidden creatures reflected a quiet resistance of untutored masses against the emerging scientific consensus of the educated elite. In the modern world, cryptozoology plays new psychological roles, channeling guilt over environmental destruction by fantasizing that lost species still survive, allowing people to recapture a sense of mysticism and danger in a world now perceived as fully charted, and expressing defiance against scientific authority by validating personal experiences over expert skepticism. In short, cryptid legends fulfill emotional and cultural needs. They re-enchant a world rendered prosaic by maps and data, and they offer an imaginary area or arena where the unknown still lurks. Recent scholarship in folklore and the humanities continues to explore these themes. David J. Puglia describes legendary monsters in North America as occupying a liminal space between reality and fiction, an epitome of hidden fears and anxieties within communities. To use his terms, modern monster theory and folklore studies argue that monsters, cryptids included, personify cultural anxieties and help communities process fears. For example, the Mothman of Point Pleasant and the Chupacabra of Puerto Rico have become symbols of community anxieties in their respective regions. Folklorists note that such legends often emerge during times of social stress or change. The Chupacabra legend, first reported in 1995 in Puerto Rico, coincided with economic and political uncertainties. Its image of a vampiric creature draining livestock tapped into fears of predation and perhaps metaphors of exploitation. Likewise, Mothman's appearance in 1960s West Virginia preceded the tragic Silver Bridge collapse of 1967, and subsequent retellings cast Mothman as a harbinger or warning figure, a reflection of collective trauma and a search for meaning in tragedy. The notion of monster culture outlined by theorists like Jeffrey Jerome Cohen provides a framework for understanding these stories. Cohen's influential 7 Theses on monsters propose, for instance, that the monster's body is a cultural body, meaning its characteristics embody cultural moments, and that the monster always escapes, symbolizing how these legends resist ever being conclusively pinned down. Monsters, and by extension cryptids, often defy clear categorization, placing them in a liminal category that violates the normal order. Cohen calls this a harbinger of contemporary crises. Bigfoot, for example, unsettles boundaries, human or animal, ape or myth. Its ambiguous status challenges how we classify our world. This aligns with another thesis. Monsters dwell at the gates of difference, meaning they often appear at the margins, geographical, social, or conceptual, and thus highlight where our understanding falters. It is precisely this marginality that makes cryptid legends fertile ground for speculative hypotheses like interdimensionality. When a phenomenon sits at the edge of the known, it invites explanations that likewise transcend normal boundaries. Folklore studies also emphasize the narrative evolution of cryptid legends. As stories are told and retold, they accumulate layers of meaning. In many cases, initial sightings or encounters are couched in fairly literal terms. For instance, a giant ape-like figure was seen in the woods. Over time, especially if conventional explanations or conclusive evidence remains elusive, the narratives may take on increasingly supernatural overtones. Folklorist Linda Egg noted how modern legends can undergo an ostension process where real-life actions and experiences start shaping and reinforcing the legend, creating a feedback loop. In the case of cryptids, early reports inspire amateur investigations and media coverage, which in turn generate more reports. If those efforts continually fail to capture a flesh and blood creature, the lore often compensates by suggesting the creature is more than real. Indeed, cryptids have a way of becoming as real as belief makes them, as one commentator put it. In that Reactor magazine review, the author Riley concludes that whatever Mothman's ontological status, the widespread belief in him has cemented his reality in cultural terms. They're as real as belief makes them. This observation underscores a critical folkloric insight. Belief itself is a form of reality in the study of legends. Whether or not a cryptid actually exists, it certainly exists in stories, in eyewitness testimony, in local traditions, and the choices people make. So, for instance, tourists flocking to Point Pleasant's Mothman Festival, or explorers trekking through the Himalayas for the Yeti. Folklore scholars treat those cultural realities as worthy of analysis in their own right. The interdimensional spillover hypothesis can be seen as a modern evolution of cryptid folklore, a way for contemporary storytellers and theorists to reconcile persistent legends with the lack of empirical evidence. By proposing that cryptids slip in and out of our dimension, believers effectively create a narrative that preserves the mystery. The creature exists, but science can't catch it due to its otherworldly nature, while also borrowing legitimacy from scientific-sounding concepts like dimension portals, etc. In folklore terms, this is an example of creative accommodation where new ideas, in this case from physics or science fiction, are incorporated into existing belief systems to keep them viable and exciting. Sharon A. Hill, a folklorist and skeptic, referred to this tendency as supernatural creep, the way paranormal interpretations gradually amplify when conventional investigation comes up short. She notes that some Bigfoot researchers unable to find a specimen begin incorporating features like time or interdimensional travel, psychic communication, etc., into their descriptions of Bigfoot. In effect, the legend adapts to its own failure to be confirmed by transcending into the supernatural. In summary, folklore studies reveal that cryptid narratives are adaptive social texts. They convey cultural emotions, fear, hope, rebellion. They evolve by absorbing new ideas, and they thrive in ambiguity. The interdimensional hypothesis is one such idea now woven into cryptid lore. Before evaluating its plausibility, it is important to recognize its folkloric utility. It keeps the legend alive by positing that cryptids can vanish at will or come from realms unseen. The lack of evidence transforms from a problem into a proof of concept. Evidence is scant because these beings aren't regular animals. This narrative moves strongly parallels older folklore motifs. For example, fairy creatures in European folklore who can enter our world from another world and just as easily disappear. The next section turns to those old metaphysical ideas into modern physics for parallels that might illuminate or complicate the notions of other dimensions and spillover phenomena. Oh boy. Huh. Anyway, I'm just getting texts from people who have like a direct connect into Venezuela, and the people are really happy that Maduro was taken out. Or at least that seems to be consensus so far. All right. Metaphysics and esoteric insights, other planes of existence. When considering cryptids as possible interdimensionals, we venture from the realm of folklore into the domain of metaphysics, the branch of philosophy and theology concerned with the fundamental nature of reality. Metaphysicians and spiritual thinkers have long entertained the idea that reality may be layered or multi-leveled, comprising dimensions or planes beyond the immediately observable. While academic philosophers typically discuss possible worlds in abstract terms, various esoteric and religious traditions have explicitly described other realms inhabited by non-physical beings. These concepts provide a historical and theoretical backdrop for the idea that creatures might literally come from another world into ours. One relevant strand comes from modern metaphysics and philosophy, the study of possibility and necessity. Philosopher David Lewis, for example, famously championed modal realism, the idea that all possible worlds are just as real as the actual world we inhabit. In Lewis's view, every way that a world could possibly be corresponds to an actually existing world, completely separate from ours but no less concrete. He describes these possible worlds as a continuum of space-time filled with objects, just like the ones we are surrounded by, differing only in their content. Importantly, Lewis did not claim we can travel to or interact with those other worlds in his framework. They are causally isolated. However, the very notion that other fully formed realities exist provides a provocative metaphysical footing for interdimensional ideas. If one nudges Lewis's theory, even as a thought experiment, it raises the whimsical question, could a Bigfoot-like creature exist in a neighboring possible world and somehow cross into ours. Mainstream philosophy would answer no, since Lewis's worlds don't overlap. But his work underscores how modern metaphysics allows one to conceive a plurality of realism or realities in which any consistent set of facts might hold. Cryptid believers sometimes echo this sentiment in lay terms when they speculate that creatures like Bigfoot live in another dimension, but can come here as they desire, as some Native American traditions hold. In a metaphorical sense, Lewis's model multiverse is akin to an infinite library of what-ifs, one of which could hold the story. What if a large bipedal ape lived in North America? Perhaps the speculation goes, once in a while, the pages of that book brush against the pages of ours. Beyond the abstractions of analytic philosophy, esoteric and mystical traditions around the world have explicitly posited multiple levels of reality and beings that move between them. In Islamic mysticism, Sufism, for example, there is the concept of Alam al-Mithal, or Mithal, the world of similitudes, described as an intermediate unseen realm between the physical world and the purely spiritual. This realm was populated by entities like the jinn, intelligent beings made of subtle substance, according to the Quran, who are said to coexist alongside humans and occasionally interact with us. The jinn offer an interesting parallel with cryptids. They are often invisible or shape-shifting, sometimes benevolent, sometimes tricksters. While cryptids in Western lore are usually assumed to be fleshy creatures, the interdimensional hypothesis edges them closer to something like jinn, hidden beings that normally reside in a parallel plane and become visible only under certain conditions. Similarly, Western occult traditions, drawing on Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and Kabbalah, envision a hierarchy of planes, from dense physical matter up through ascending subtle planes, such as the etheric, astral, mental, and so on. Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy in the 19th century popularized this stratified cosmology in the modern West. Blavatsky and her successors, Annie Besant, C.W. Ledbetter, etc., spoke of 7 planes of existence. Humans normally perceive only the lowest physical plane, but occult adepts or certain entities could access higher planes. The astral plane in particular was described as a realm of spirits, ghosts, and thought forms, a concept not too distant from saying another dimension full of weird beings. It is notable that the term dimension itself took on mystical connotations through such esoteric usage. The interdimensional hypothesis in ufology, which overlaps with cryptid lore, is said to have roots in spiritualism's fascination with the fourth dimension as a spiritual realm. By the early 20th century, the word interdimensional appears in fiction, for instance, a 1906 novel, in a paranormal context. The merging of scientific language with spiritual cosmology allowed fringe ideas to sound more scientific. In fact, during the late 19th century, the term ether, a then scientific concept for a medium filling space, was eagerly adopted by occult writers to label a subtle substance or plane. They spoke of an etheric plane just above the physical, populated by etheric entities. Although 19th century physics discarded the luminiferous ether, the notion lived on in metaphysics and occult literature. The pattern here is clear. Metaphysics and mysticism have long speculated about parallel existences, be they other worlds, spiritual planes, or higher dimensions, and beings that can cross the thresholds between them. So how do these ideas connect to cryptids? In some cultural contexts, they already are connected. Many indigenous American traditions conceive of Bigfoot, or its local analog by various names, not as a mere animal, but as a spiritual being with supernatural powers. As one article on Native Legends puts it, almost all Indians believe Bigfoot is a non-physical creature. Some tribes say Bigfoot can transform into a wolf, or that it lives in another dimension from the physical plane, but can come here as it desires. Additionally, Bigfoot is often attributed with physical abilities or a kind of selective invisibility, appearing visible to some people, but not to others who are present. Such descriptions resonate strongly with the interdimensional hypothesis. They imply that Sasquatch belongs to a spirit world parallel to ours. Interestingly, these indigenous views predate by centuries or millennia the modern physics talk of extra dimensions. In epistemologies of these cultures, explaining Bigfoot as a transdimensional being is not a wild sci-fi leap, of the traditional explanation. Bigfoot is a guardian or spirit of the land, one that slips in and out of the physical realm. The modern scientific method, or the modern scientific-minded community, by contrast, initially framed Bigfoot as an undiscovered primate, a flesh and blood creature that simply eludes capture. It's only after decades of failure to obtain hard evidence that some researchers have circled back to a quasi-spiritual explanation, as if rediscovering what native lore said all along. Folklorist James W. Foster has noted this convergence of modern paranormal enthusiasts with indigenous beliefs, remarking that Western researchers who propose interdimensional or psychic Bigfoot theories are effectively arriving where native myth has been since the beginning, albeit via quantum jargon rather than sacred narratives. Finally, it is worth noting the perspective of comparative religion and depth psychology. Thinkers like Carl Jung, in his 1950s analysis of UFO phenomena, suggested that these mysterious sightings might be projections of the collective unconscious, essentially archetypal images welling up in response to cultural needs. Jung stopped short of declaring UFOs purely psychological. He left their physical realities an open question, but emphasized their mythical and symbolic dimensions. We can extend a Jungian lens to cryptids. Perhaps Bigfoot or Mothman manifest in our world in part through the medium of human consciousness. That is, they seem to be seen as tulpas or thought forms, entities created or empowered by human belief and fear, which take on a quasi-real form. In Tibetan mysticism, a tulpa is a being or object brought into existence through intense mental concentration. Some paranormal theories, admittedly on the fringe, have speculated that cryptids might be unwitting tulpas, collective human belief giving shape to something from another plane. While this idea veers away from empirical science, it reflects or highlights a metaphysical principle. The line between mind and matter might not be as rigid as we assume. If consciousness can affect reality, a big if, but one entertained in various Eastern philosophies and even some interpretations of quantum physics, then perhaps what we perceive as an interdimensional visitor is partly invited by our own minds. The quasi-metaphysical notion intersects with folklore. Remember the earlier quote, "They're as real as belief makes them." A metaphysically inclined person might take that literally, that belief is a causal force bridging dimensions. In summary, metaphysical and esoteric frameworks, both ancient and modern, provide conceptual scaffolding for the interdimensional cryptid hypothesis. They supply the vocabulary of planes and portals, astral, etheric, etc., the ontology of unseen beings, jinns, spirits, tulkas, and even a proto-explanation of how crossing might occur through spiritual practices, energetic gateways, or consciousness itself as a bridge. However, these ideas often lack the rigor or testability that scientific inquiry demands. To bridge that gap, we turn to the third pillar, physics and its own speculations about dimensions and universes. If metaphysics gives us imaginative possibilities, physics may give us mechanisms, however hypothetical, by which an entity could slip from one world to another. Now we move on to physics, dimensions, multiverses, and wormholes. Modern physics, especially in its more theoretical domains, has introduced concepts that sound remarkably like science fiction, or even mysticism to the uninitiated. Ideas of hidden dimensions curled up beyond perceptibility, parallel universes born from cosmic inflation or quantum mechanics, and space-time tunnels connecting distant points abound in the frontiers of cosmology and quantum theory. Importantly, these ideas emerge not from a desire to explain paranormal phenomenon, but from attempts to solve deep problems in physics and cosmology. Nevertheless, they create a scientifically framed space of possibility in which something akin to interdimensional spillover could at least hypothetically occur. Here we will outline a few key physics concepts: extra dimensions, multiverse theories, and wormholes/portals, evaluating how they might accommodate or refute the notion of cryptids traversing between dimensions. In the realm of particle physics and string theory, the idea of extraspatial dimensions is almost commonplace. While we experience only 3 dimensions of space plus 1 of time, certain theories suggest there could be more spatial dimensions that are not readily apparent. For instance, in string theory, a leading albeit unproven framework for unifying forces and particles, the mathematics work out elegantly only if we assume around 10 or 11 dimensions in total. These extra dimensions are thought to be compactified or curled up extremely small scales, which is why we don't notice them in everyday life. Physicist Lisa Randall, in her book Warped Passages, discusses scenarios in which these hidden dimensions might even be infinite in extent, but warped in such a way that only gravity and not other forces can penetrate into them. One model developed by Randall and Raman Sundram in 1999 imagines our observable universe as a three-dimensional brain floating in a higher dimensional space, the bulk. Ordinary matter and light are stuck to our brain, but gravity leaks out into the extra dimension, which could explain why gravity is so weak compared to other forces. Intriguingly, the Randall-Sundram model implies that if the bulk dimension has certain properties, it might allow effects that appear exotic, for example, miniature black holes or shortcuts in space. In fact, one consequence noted by researchers is that traversable wormholes might be possible in a brain world scenario without needing negative energy, which is normally required. This is a highly theoretical suggestion, but it shows that mainstream physics does allow speculation on interdimensional travel, at least in the sense of moving through unseen dimensions to shortcut our own. Now consider the multiverse ideas. There are multiple multiverse theories in physics, arising from different subfields. One version comes from quantum mechanics, the many worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957, famously posits that every quantum event that could happen does happen, but in divergent branches of the universe. Thus, at every moment, reality splits into countless versions. A multiverse of parallel timelines. In each branch, a different outcome of each quantum event is realized. The many worlds concept implies an unimaginably large number of universes that are parallel to ours. Though in this theory, they do not interact. They merely span a vast configuration space of possibilities. If taken at face value, one of those universes could indeed contain, say, an actual Bigfoot, even if our timeline doesn't. However, by construction, the branches don't reconverge, so no Bigfoot would jump from one branch to another. Another multiverse proposal is cosmic inflation's bubble universes. Physicist Alan Guth, Andre Lindy, and others argue that if inflation, an exponential expansion of space in the very early universe, occurs in a broad swath of space-time, it may not end uniformly. Some regions stop inflating and become bubble universes like ours, while elsewhere inflation continues, budding off other bubble universes endlessly, a process called eternal inflation. This yields a multiverse of distinct universes separated by inflating space. These bubble universes might have different physical constants or compositions. Again, direct interaction seems precluded by the vast and expanding gulf between bubbles. Yet some theorists ponder if bubble collisions could occur, leaving imprints. No evidence of such collisions has been found in our cosmic microwave background, but the idea isn't entirely fantastical. One reason the multiverse idea gained traction is the so-called string theory landscape. String theory's equations allow an enormous number, 10 to the 500th power or more, of possible vacuum states, each corresponding to a different way to curl up the extra dimensions, leading to different laws of physics. Eternal inflation nicely complements this. Each bubble universe could realize a different vacuum from the landscape, populating all possibilities. Our universe's properties would then be just one random draw from a cosmic grab bag, explaining why things like the cosmological constant are small but non-zero. Selection bias may only exist in the bubble that had life-friendly constants. While this is all highly theoretical, it shows how physics countenances a plenitude of universes. The question for us is, can anything travel between them? Conventional answers range from probably not to absolutely not. The distances and barriers, inflation still blowing bubbles apart faster than light, for instance, are effectively insurmountable with known physics. Nonetheless, in the imaginative exercise of this paper, if cryptids were interdimensional travelers, you might picture their home as one of these myriad universes and speculate Some rare flaw in the separation allows a crossover, essentially a cosmic accident or a deliberate traversal via some higher dimensional shortcut. This brings us to the concept of wormholes and portals. Wormholes are hypothetical solutions of Einstein's general relativity equations that act as tunnels connecting two distant points in space-time. First conceived as the Einstein-Rosen bridge, which initially appeared to connect two universes, albeit non-traversably, wormholes were later studied in traversable forms by Kip Thorne and others. A traversable wormhole, if it exists, could allow matter to move from one location to another almost instantly. Typically, to keep a wormhole throat open, exotic matter with negative energy is required, which has no confirmed existence through quantum Casimir, though quantum Casimir effects hint at the concept. Some recent studies even suggest tiny wormholes might be possible without exotic matter under certain conditions involving quantum fields and special space-time geometries. For the purposes of interdimensional cryptids, a portal is essentially a lay term for a wormhole or a similar dimensional gateway. If Bigfoot or Mothman are using portals, one could imagine a localized tear in space-time connecting our environment to some other realm. Notably, this is exactly how some eyewitnesses and researchers have described events. A portal opening guarding by little demonic Bigfoots that allow the creature to appear or disappear without a trace, as Sharon Hill relayed skeptically from paranormal investigators' reports. In Hill's account, shining a flashlight at the portal made it vanish, poof, like magic. The portal explanation is invoked by those enthusiasts to explain the lack of physical evidence. Bigfoot literally isn't here most of the time, and when it is, it's half in another dimension. From a physics perspective, if one took this seriously, it would require very exotic conditions. Perhaps a localized region of space-time with extreme curvature or quantum gravitational effects. No such phenomena are known to mainstream science on the human scale. However, one might speculate about natural wormholes. Some cosmological models, especially in the context of brain world scenarios or quantum gravity, allow the existence of mini wormholes that could pop in and out of existence at microscopic scales. Enlarging one to microscopic size for an animal to pass through is far beyond any known mechanism. Yet here is where speculative reasoning steps in. If an advanced technology or an unknown natural process did manage it, what would it look like? Possibly a glowing sphere or tunnel of light, sudden electromagnetic disturbances, etc. It's fascinating that many paranormal reports and hauntings, UFOs, and cryptid encounters alike do mention orbs of light, strange electromagnetic effects, compasses spinning, batteries draining, and feelings of distortion in the environment. For example, people who claim to have encountered Bigfoot often also report bizarre occurrences such as odd lights, electromagnetic disruptions, or an abrupt feeling of disorientation in the surroundings. In the Connect paranormal summary, these are taken as indicators that a portal might have been in use, allowing the creature to slip in or out. A physicist might smile at these anecdotes, but one could muse if a wormhole did open near observers, one might indeed expect electromagnetic anomalies due to intense gravitational tidal forces affecting electrical equipment and psychological distortion, perhaps due to magnetosensory effects on the brain or just sheer shock. Astrophysicist Eugene Lim notes in a 2023 phys.org article that talk of multiverse and parallel universes, while speculative, is grounded in serious physics. He emphasizes that these ideas weren't concocted from science fiction, but fell out of equations and cosmological models. The many worlds interpretation of quantum physics suggests all outcomes happen, implying a branching multiverse. The eternal inflation scenario gives a multiverse of vast bubble universes, and string theory's extra dimensions plus landscape provide the settings for those myriad universes. Excuse me. In the same piece, Lim reminds us that while these ideas solve some puzzles, they also raise deep questions. For instance, if there are 10 to the 500th possible universes, where are we in the string landscape and why? One answer offered is the anthropic principle. Aided by the multiverse, we find ourselves in one of the rare universes that can support intelligent life because only those universes get observers. All the rest might have sterile or bizarre physics. If cryptids were interdimensional spillovers, one could whimsically argue that they are an anthropic symptom in reverse. Not only is our universe fine-tuned for life, it might even be that life or organisms occasionally wander between universes. Of course, this is pure speculation. There's no accepted mechanism for such wanderings. However, intriguingly, some physicists have contemplated the notion of brain collision events. In one picture, the ekpyrotic model in cosmology, our universe's Big Bang might have been caused by a collision between two 3D brains floating in a higher dimension. If brains can collide, perhaps small interactions could occur more gently. A cryptid appearing might be likened to a brain leakage, a tiny region where two universes, two brains briefly make contact, allowing an exchange of matter and energy. This is not standard physics by any means, but it's a theoretically conceivable scenario in the brain world context. In fact, the notion of window areas mentioned earlier, where UFOs and cryptids frequently appear, is uncannily similar to saying certain locales have a weak spot in the fabric between dimensions. John Keel speculated that Earth's magnetic field anomalies might be responsible for such window areas. He noted the planet is pockmarked with magnetic anomalies, hinting that these could facilitate breaches in the normal rules. Could geomagnetic oddities open a sort of natural wormhole? It's a stretch, but worth noting that geophysically, some places like the Uinta Basin in Utah, home of Skinwalker Ranch, do have unusual magnetic readings. At Skinwalker Ranch, a team of researchers documented an occasion where a glowing orange portal opened in midair through which a strange humanoid creature emerged. They also noted spikes in radiation and magnetic readings during various incidents. While such reports are anecdotal and controversial, they feed the idea that physics as we know it may have rare loopholes or extreme edge cases when an overlap between worlds become visible. In sum, from the advantage of physics, extra dimensions are possible but tiny or hidden. Parallel universes are plausible in theory but distant and non-communicating, and wormholes are a solution of the equations but requiring unreal conditions to be traversable. None of these phenomena have been empirically confirmed in a way that can directly support interdimensional cryptids, yet they show that science is not entirely devoid of concepts that rhyme with the idea. Physics, therefore, produces a language and conceptual toolkit that can be appropriated to imagine how an interdimensional spillover might occur. It is important to stress that the mainstream scientific stance would be extremely skeptical of applying these theories to explain cryptids. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And currently, cryptids provide scant physical evidence at all, let alone evidence of exotic physics. Nevertheless, for a multidisciplinary exploration, physics gives us a way to discuss interdimensionality without abandoning rationality altogether. We can frame questions like, if Bigfoot were interdimensional, what conservation laws might be broken or preserved? Could a stable portal conserve energy, or would its use produce observable effects like light, heat, radiation that we can measure? The questions nudge the interdimensional hypothesis from pure fantasy toward a testable hypothesis, however far-fetched. Having reviewed folklore, metaphysics, and physics, we see three complementary pictures. Folklore tells us why people might believe in interdimensional beings, to keep wonder alive, to explain anomalies, to convey a meaning. Metaphysics offers what it might mean philosophically or spiritually to exist in another plane. Physics suggests how, in principle, the barriers between realities could be pierced, though with great difficulty. We now proceed to integrate these perspectives into a cohesive theoretical framework and then apply it to concrete cases of cryptids to assess whether the interdimensional spillover idea holds any explanatory power. Okay, so sorry, folks, I ain't gonna sleep last night. Synthesizing the insights from the prior section, we propose a theoretical framework for the interdimensional spillover hypothesis as it pertains to cryptids. In this framework, cryptids are hypothesized to be entities whose origin lies in a parallel realm or dimension, distinct from our familiar physical world, but which occasionally and temporarily manifest in our reality. The framework must account for three aspects. One, the ontological status of these parallel realms. What and where are they? Two, the mechanism of spillover. How and why an entity would cross into our dimension. And three, the expected signatures of such a crossing. What effects or evidence might it produce? Additionally, it should address the cultural dimension. Why this hypothesis is compelling or meaningful to people. So let's start with the ontological assumptions. We define an interdimensional cryptid as a being whose true home environment is not the three-dimensional space-time continuum we inhabit, but rather another domain which could be conceived variously as a higher dimensional space, a parallel universe, or a non-physical plane. For generality, let's call this an alternate reality. The alternate reality might be similar to ours, as in another physical universe with its own ecosystem, or radically different, an abstract or spiritual plane with different laws of nature. We do not fix a single interpretation, but allow for possibilities ranging from the esoteric, for instance, a creature is from an astral plane overlapping Earth, to the scientific multiverse. For instance, the creature evolved in Earth in a parallel universe and normally resides there. The key ontological claim is that the cryptid is not fundamentally a part of our world's ecosystem in the way a bear or gorilla is, but comes from outside. This immediately positions the interdimensional spillover hypothesis, ISH, the ISH, we'll call it the ISH, against the conventional cryptozoological view. In classic cryptozoology, creatures like Bigfoot are presumed biological inhabitants of Earth that have avoided detection. Under ISH, creatures like Bigfoot would be visitors. This could explain, in theory, the glaring lack of physical remains, such as bones or bodies. If a creature dies or returns to its dimension, it leaves nothing behind. It could also explain high variability in sightings. They might cluster around certain times or places when a crossing occurs, rather than being uniformly present. Then there's the mechanics of spillover. Drawing from metaphysics and physics, we consider several notional mechanisms by which spillover could occur. The first is a portal mechanism. A transient wormhole or gateway opens between the alternate reality and our own. This could be a naturally occurring phenomenon, for instance, linked to geomagnetic anomalies, as Keel suggested for window areas, or an artificially induced one. Perhaps the entity itself or some higher intelligence can create portals. In folklore, this is analogous to fairy rings or doorways to the fairy realm. In physics, it's analogous to a space-time wormhole. The portal mechanism implies that cryptids don't phase in gradually, but appear abruptly at a location and disappear just as abruptly. Eyewitness reports of cryptids often do feature sudden appearances and vanishings which this mechanism would accommodate. Then there's the phase mechanism, the vibrational alignment. A more metaphysical concept is that our world and the other world normally differ in frequency or phase, but occasionally they align or an entity shifts its vibrational state to match ours, becoming visible and tangible. This model is commonly found in occult descriptions. So, for instance, ghosts raising or lowering vibration to materialize. An interdimensional Bigfoot under this mechanism might usually exist in an invisible state. Hence, some witnesses claim it can turn invisible and then phase into visibility. Unlike a portal, this doesn't require a hole in space, but rather a change in the entity's properties. In modern physics terms, one could imagine something like a brain overlap, our 3D space and another 3D space briefly sharing coordinates in a higher dimension. Then there's the possession projection mechanism. Here's the idea that the interdimensional being doesn't physically travel at all, but projects an avatar or assumes a physical form temporarily in our world. This is akin to a tulpa or an incantation. In folklore, shape-shifting spirits or animals taking bodily form would fit this idea. Under Ish, a Mothman might actually be a non-material entity that could project a quasi-physical body, perhaps by manipulating energy or matter at the site of appearance. Once its task is done or it is disturbed, the body dissolves or is reabsorbed, leaving no trace. While highly speculative, this mechanism dovetails with reports where cryptids seemingly strangely ephemeral or invulnerable. Bullets pass through the giant wolf at Skinwalker Ranch with no effect. The above mechanisms are not mutually exclusive and could operate together. For instance, a portal could open and a being phases through it. The framework remains open-minded about why spillovers happen. Possibilities include accidental crossings, the creature fell through a rift, unexpectedly, exploratory crossings, an intelligent entity deliberately visiting, or reactive crossings triggered by human presence or mental states. Some paranormal researchers suggest human fear or curiosity can facilitate encounters, a notion echoing Jungian or psychic theories. And then expected signatures. If cryptids are interdimensional, what would we expect to observe beyond just the creature itself? This framework predicts a cluster of ancillary phenomena might occupy or accompany cryptid sightings. The first are the electromagnetic disturbances. As mentioned, if a portal or dimensional shift involves exotic physics, it might disturb electromagnetic fields. Reports of batteries dying, compasses spinning, radios malfunctioning in conjunction with cryptid or UFO encounters are common in the literature. The History Channel's investigation of Skinwalker Ranch in 2020 documented sudden spikes of radiation and magnetic field changes during unusual events. In our framework, such effects are not coincidental but symptomatic of a crossing event, essentially byproducts of the door opening or the environment adjusting to an interloper. Then there's optical and auditory anomalies. Light phenomena such as glowing orbs, flashes, or strange illumination could occur. Perhaps the portal's event horizon glowing or Cherenkov radiation-like effects if exotic particles are produced. Strange sounds, buzzing, humming might also be heard. For instance, some Bigfoot witnesses report a loud buzzing or a deep vibration just before an encounter, which some interpret as infrasound produced by the creature. In an ish concept or context, perhaps that sound is part of the dimensional shift process. Then there are also temporal distortions. Though less commonly reported, one could speculate that time might flow oddly near an interdimensional event, akin to gravitational time dilation near a wormhole. People might experience missing time or time lapses. Such reports are more prevalent in UFO abduction lore, but there are a few encrypted stories too. For instance, individuals who chase a cryptid and later realize hours passed when only minutes were felt. Then there's psychological effects. An interdimensional encounter might affect witnesses' consciousness. Intense fear or a sense of Oz factor, a term by researcher Jenny Randles, describing a bubble of silence or surreal calm during paranormal events, could occur. If cryptids have psychic influence, as some claim Bigfoot does, perhaps it's a side effect of dimensional transit messing with neural processes. Our framework includes the possibility that interdimensional beings could naturally possess telepathic or mind-affecting qualities. Indeed, many such beings in folklore, fairies, jinn, etc., do. These signatures provide a way to test the hypothesis, at least qualitatively. If someone claims an interdimensional Bigfoot encounter, we can check for these correlates. Did electronics fail? Were there lights in the sky? Did the area show magnetic anomalies on instruments? The more such effects cluster with cryptid sightings, the more one might suspect something beyond a normal animal encounter is happening. Then there's the cultural and interpretive aspect. Lastly, this framework acknowledges that the ish, as much a cultural narrative as a scientific one. It serves an explanatory function for believers in areas with recurring cryptid sightings, for instance, the Chestnut Ridge in Pennsylvania for Bigfoot and UFOs, or Point Pleasant for Mothman. The interdimensional narrative helps knit together disparate phenomena into a coherent story. Folklorist Jack Santino might call this the formation of a local legend complex, where multiple strange events, haunting, lights in the sky, cryptid sightings, are woven into one tapestry. The ish provides a single grand explanation. All these weird things are connected by the fact that they come from elsewhere. This echoes what John Keel proposed with his ultra-terrestrials theory, that UFOs, monsters, and paranormal entities are different manifestations of a singular, otherworldly intelligence or energy. Our framework doesn't require a singular case, but it does preclude it either. It could be that Bigfoot and Mothman are entirely unrelated species, each from their own dimension, or it could be they are manifestations of one underlying phenomena, shape-shifting into different guises. as Keel and later authors like Jaffelet and Patrick Harper have mused. Either interpretation fits within Ish. Crucially, the framework remains speculative. It is a set of guiding principles to examine cases, not a confirmed theory. To assess its usefulness, we turn next to case studies, applying the interdimensional lens to known cryptid cases, Bigfoot, Mothman, and a few others. We will see to what extent this framework can account for the pattern of evidence or lack thereof and the folklore surrounding each cryptid, and where it might fall short or conflict with alternative explanations. All right, so let's move to case study analysis. So Bigfoot, flesh and blood primate or interdimensional wanderer? Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, is perhaps the most famous cryptid in North America. Described as a large bipedal, hairy, ape-like creature, Bigfoot has been sighted in forests from the Pacific Northwest to the Appalachian Mountains. The modern Bigfoot legend crystallized in the late 1950s with reports from California and the famous 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film, a short clip allegedly showing a striding Sasquatch. For decades, the dominant hypothesis among Bigfoot researchers was zoological. Bigfoot was assumed to be a relic hominid or great ape species, sometimes linked to the extinct giant ape, Gigantopithecus. Many sought physical proof, footprints, hair, scat, and ultimately a body or bones to verify its existence. Yet, despite thousands of eyewitness accounts and footprints, casts, no definitive physical specimen has been found. The frustrating lack of hard evidence, despite Bigfoot's pop culture omnipresence, has led to schisms in the cryptozoology community. A faction of researchers, including respected figures like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who's an anatomist and primate specialist, continue to favor a biological flesh and blood explanation, focusing on footprint morphology and possible primate behavior. Others, however, have ventured into paranormal explanations to account for Bigfoot's elusiveness and high strangeness elements in many reports. Now we move to interdimensional perspectives. By the 1970s, a few researchers like John Keel and Ivan T. Sanderson began noting odd correlations. Bigfoot sightings often coincided with UFO sightings or other paranormal activity. In 1973, Pennsylvania investigator Stan Gordon documented a wave of incidents where witnesses reported both a Bigfoot and strange lights in the sky around the same time and place. These strange cases started a discussion of a possible high strangeness Bigfoot. Instead of a North American ape, Bigfoot was being reframed by some as an interdimensional entity. In Keel's Strange Creatures from Time and Space, he speculated Sasquatch might be transmogrifications of energy from what he called the superspectrum, briefly taking physical form before fading. Such language was essentially interdimensional in modern parlance. In recent years, the interdimensional theory has been embraced by a subset of Bigfoot enthusiasts in books. Books like The Psychic Sasquatch by Jack Lapseritis and Quantum Bigfoot by Ron Moorhead explicitly posit that Bigfoot has paranormal abilities and originates from a non-ordinary reality. While these works are not scientific, they collect anecdotal evidence. Eyewitnesses who claim Bigfoot vanished in a flash of light, or footprints that trail off suddenly in an open field as if the creature literally disappeared mid-stride. Indeed, disappearing tracks are a recurring motif. Many Bigfoot footprints have been followed by trackers only to stop abruptly in snow or mud with no sign of where the creature went. No final prints indicating a jump to a tree, no crawling, just ending. For flesh and blood advocates, this can mean the creature backtracked carefully or leaped somewhere, though that often seems implausible given the territory. For interdimensional proponents, this is practically a smoking gun, evidence that Bigfoot stepped back through the portal or shifted out of our dimension, hence no more prints. Consider a notable account from Skinwalker Ranch in Utah's Uinta Basin, an area notorious for associated paranormal phenomena. In the mid-1990s, researchers there claimed to witness a Bigfoot-like creature emerge from a tunnel of light hovering above the ground. The apparition was caught on thermal imaging, large humanoid heat signature dropping out of an oval light source. When investigators reached the spot, they found nothing, just a fleeing single track in the snow. This story, if true, dramatically illustrates the Ish, a literal portal event and an interdimensional Bigfoot appearance. Skeptics question the veracity and lack of photographic proof beyond researcher testimony. Nonetheless, it has become a staple example in pro-Ish literature. Another site, the Chestnut Ridge area in Pennsylvania, has had decades of Bigfoot sightings, often intertwined with mysterious lights. Researcher and author Maxim Furyk notes that strange connections between UFOs and Bigfoot sightings in that region, suggesting that rather than aliens traveling light years, it could be beings using wormholes to hop between dimensions. He references Jacques Vallée's ideas as a basis. Vallée argued the extraterrestrial hypothesis for UFOs is outdated, favoring an interdimensional hypothesis where UFOs, and by extension Bigfoot, use wormholes to fold space-time. The implication is Bigfoot and UFOs might share the same transit system. Indeed, in 1974, one Pennsylvania man famously claimed to have seen a Bigfoot shot by a farmer dissolved into a ball of light and then flew away, an anecdote often cited by Ish supporters. Perhaps the most compelling support for an interdimensional view from a cultural standpoint is the resonance with Native American beliefs. As touched on earlier, many indigenous narratives regard Sasquatch as a spirit. For example, the Sioux speak of Chiatanka, Big Elder Brother, as a spiritual protector, and the Iroquois have legends of stone giants with supernatural powers. The Legends of America article summarized some Indian tribes think these creatures live in another dimension but can come here as they desire. This idea, frankly, is the interdimensional hypothesis articulated long before modern physics. Indigenous informants often caution that Bigfoot is not to be hunted or trifled with, as it's not an animal but a guardian being that can curse or lose one in the woods. Modern reports echo a quasi-supernatural tone. For instance, witnesses describing encounters often report a profound fear or sense of being watched before they see anything, as if the creature can affect their mind, leading to speculation about telepathy or infrasound. Now, analyzing with the ISH, the Ish framework, Bigfoot makes a fascinating test case for the Ish. Using our theoretical framework, does Bigfoot display characteristics of an interdimensional spillover? Well, first, there's lack of physical traces. So yes, Bigfoot notably lacks conclusive physical evidence. No bodies or fossils. If Bigfoot were an animal, its absence from the fossil record and zero roadkill or carcasses are perplexing, though not impossible given wilderness expanse and perhaps burial practices, as some suggest. Under Ish, this is expected. Bigfoot isn't native here. It just comes and goes, and perhaps even its bodies vanish, either returning to its realm or disintegrating if the manifestation ends. This aligns with the portal mechanism or projection mechanism in the framework. The entity doesn't die here, or if it does, the body might fade out. Then there's sudden appearances and disappearances. Many reports, as mentioned, have Bigfoot appearing suddenly, stepping onto a road, then back into bush, gone when the car reaches the spot, and disappearing suddenly, footprints ending, etc. The Ish portal mechanism would directly account for that. A flesh and blood explanation suggests here without invoking perfect stealth. Then there's ancillary phenomenon. Bigfoot encounters sometimes include strange lights, floating orbs in woods seen by witnesses either before or after seeing the creature. Foul, sulfurous odors. Witnesses often describe a strong stench accompanying Bigfoot. Interestingly, sulfur smell or rotten egg odor is also reported in many paranormal contexts, from demons to UFOs. In folklore, sulfur is a sign of crossing realms, as in brimstone from hell. Additionally, electrical malfunctions have been reported, flashlights dying, camera batteries inexplicably drained when trying to photograph Bigfoot. Our framework sees these as potential signatures of an interdimensional event. On the other hand, skeptics might say they are convenient excuses for why no good photos exist. My camera died just when I saw it. Then there's psychological and physiological. Witnesses often describe being frozen in fear or experiencing a sense of unreality during encounters. In some cases, people report what they interpret as mind speak or telepathic communications from Bigfoot. If Bigfoot is interdimensional, perhaps it has mental abilities to induce calm or fear. Alternatively, if it's a projection, the encounter might be akin to a visionary experience induced in the witness's mind. Some researchers have compared Bigfoot's sightings to shamanic encounters with tutelary spirits. Given these points, the Ish can make sense of a lot of Bigfoot's enduring mysteries. However, it's important to consider counterpoints and challenges. There's the consistency of physical evidence. Some evidence of Bigfoot is quite mundane. Clear footprints with dermal ridges, audio recordings of calls or wood knocks, hair samples, usually identified later as known animals, but a few defy identification beyond primate-like. If Bigfoot were popping in and out of reality, one might expect its physical interactions to be inconsistent or weird, like partially formed footprints or flickering visibility. Yet footprints often show a heavy weight and normal gait, suggesting a solid animal. One might counter when manifest, it's fully physical, leaving normal traces. It's only at entry-exit points that anomalies occur, like tracks ending. But still, for all practical purposes, a manifested Bigfoot in this view behaves exactly like a biological being. It eats, leaves scat, howls, etc. This raises the question, if it can be so completely physical, how does it transition out? Does its scat vanish later? Interestingly, very few alleged Bigfoot scat or hail samples hold up. Maybe it does vanish later. The Ish doesn't fully answer why more trace evidence isn't collected unless Bigfoot visits are brief and in remote areas where traces aren't found, or do they avoid leaving evidence deliberately? Multiplicity and breeding. There are thousands of Bigfoot reports across decades implying either a breeding population of creatures or a repeatedly visiting entity. If interdimensional, are we dealing with one or several Bigfoot? Some proponents think Bigfoot might be an entity that can clone appearances, often think there is a whole parallel ecosystem with Sasquatch, hence multiple individuals seen together occasionally, like mothers with offspring. It's hard to pin down how interdimensional ecology works. Folklore from native peoples sometimes speaks of entire clans of these beings. If so, what prompts a whole family to cross? Alternatively, maybe our reality is like a pasture they occasionally graze in, and then they return home. And then why primates? If dimensions overlap, why so many interdimensional interlopers look like upright apes? One might expect a truly alien world to produce very non-human-like entities. The fact Bigfoot is so close to us biologically, hominid form, could either hint that it is of earthly origin, such as the large branch of hominid, or if interdimensional, perhaps the worlds are not too different or the creatures chooses a form we can process, as some paranormal theories suggest. So, for instance, ultra-terrestrials choose culturally relevant guises. This edges into territory of conscious shapeshifting to fit expectations, which is speculative but not entirely out of line with how folklore entities behave. Fairies often wore the costume of the period when manifesting to people, etc. In conclusion, for Bigfoot, the interdimensional hypothesis provides a framework that intriguingly fits many odd aspects of the Sasquatch saga: the vanishing axe, the cross phenomenon links, the folklore alignment with spirit beings, and the frustration of conventional search. It recasts Bigfoot from a biological mystery to an ontological mystery. Not what species is Bigfoot, but what reality is Bigfoot from. For science-minded folks, this is arguably jumping from the frying pan into the fire. It multiplies mysteries rather than resolving them. But for those comfortable with Fortean anomalies, it offers a satisfying explanation that addresses the primary problem, lack of proof, by essentially saying Bigfoot is real, just not in the way you think. As Bigfoot researcher John Napier once said, if they don't exist, something else is going on that is even more interesting. The Ish takes Napier's dilemma and runs with it. Maybe that something else is indeed far more interesting, like cracks in reality. All right, then we have the Mothman, the harbinger for another world. The Mothman is a legendary winged humanoid first reported in 1966 around Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Eyewitnesses described a gray or dark man-sized figure with large wings and glowing red eyes. The creature was sighted by numerous locals over the span of a year, often in the vicinity of an abandoned TNT factory and surrounded by woods. Witnesses experienced intense fear, sometimes claiming the creature chased their vehicles at high speeds. The Mothman sightings abruptly ceased after December 15th, 1967, the date of the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, which killed 46 people. This calamity was later woven into the legend. Many came to believe that Mothman's appearances were an omen or warning of an impending disaster. Journalist John A. Keel chronicled these events in his book, The Mothman Prophecies, blending investigative reporting with his theories about paranormal phenomena. Keel not only detailed the Mothman sightings, but also a flap of UFO activity, weird phone calls, men in black encounters, and prophetic dreams in the area. He ultimately put forward that Mothman was not an isolated cryptid, but part of a broader pattern of ultra-terrestrial manifestations. Entities from a parallel reality with perhaps a penchant for playing tricks on humans. In Keel's view, Mothman wasn't a flesh and blood monster or an alien in a spaceship, but something more exotic. A being that could step in and out of our world, akin to demons or fairies of old, but interpreted through a modern lens. Since then, Mothman has become a fixture in American folklore. There is a Mothman museum and an annual festival in Point Pleasant. Reported sightings of similar flying humanoids have occurred elsewhere in later years, notably a cluster of sightings around Chicago's Lake Michigan in 2017, dubbed the Chicago Mothman, and earlier cases like the Owl Man of Cornwall, UK in 1976. Skeptics often explain the original Mothman as misidentified large birds such as owls or sandhill cranes. Indeed, a sandhill crane with albinism, hence red eye shine, was posited by a wildlife biologist at the time. However, many witnesses were adamant they saw a humanoid with a 10-foot wingspan, not a crane. The story's enduring aura is that of a prophetic and otherworldly visitor connected with strategy. All right, so then there are the interdimensional angles. Mothman's case is saturated with high strangeness that invites an interdimensional interpretation. First, unlike Bigfoot, nobody really thought Mothman was a normal animal. The very name Mothman, coined by newspapers playing off the Batman comic villain, suggests a creature outside usual taxonomy. Locals also called it a birdman or big bird. Well, clearly it didn't fit known species. The timing of sightings with the bridge disaster gave it a paranormal mystique. This is reminiscent of the banshee in Irish folklore, a spirit whose appearance or wailing portends death. The banshee is firmly in the realm of the supernatural, not a zoological entity. Likewise, Mothman quickly gained a reputation as possibly a spiritual harbinger. John Keel's investigation led him to consider Mothman as an example of what he termed windows, areas of concentrated paranormal events. He even theorized that Point Pleasant might lie on some interdimensional fault line that opened up in 1966 to 67. The fact that UFO sightings were numerous during the same period was key. Witnesses reported bright lights in the sky, and one even claimed to receive messages from an entity called Indrid Cold, the so-called grinning man or man in black figure linked to the case. Keel posited that all these phenomena were different masks of the same ultraterrestrials. He avoided the term interdimensional in the book that gained popularity later, but his concept is analogous. Beings from outside our space-time who stage various manifestations, as monsters, spacemen, etc., to manipulate or interact with us. In Keel's writing, he even speculates there may be window zones with electromagnetic anomalies enabling these manifestations. Mothman in particular, with its eerie timing and elusive nature, fits an interdimensional mold. It appeared, caused fear and wonder, and vanished, leaving behind tantalizing correlations rather than hard proof. In terms of our framework, what would Mothman appearances look like? Possibly as a temporary projection. Some witnesses described it materializing or taking off vertically with whooshing sound, not like a bird launching, or as a visitor via portal. No one saw a portal per se in Mothman's case, but the concurrent UFO might be considered vehicles or dimensional doorways. Some witnesses experienced poltergeist phenomena and precognitive dreams during the Mothman period, suggesting a broader disturbance in Point Pleasant's reality fabric. Local folklore has since embraced metaphysical explanations. Some have suggested Mothman was a curse tied to a Native American legend, Chief Cornstalk's curse on Point Pleasant, implying a spiritual retribution. Others, influenced by Keel and later the Mothman Prophecies film in 2002, see Mothman as either a guardian angel trying to warn of danger or a Grim Reaper type attracting disaster. In all these interpretations, Mothman is not a biological anomaly, but a being from beyond. So, analysis with the Ish framework. Mothman's case, though concentrated in a short time span, provides a rich scenario to test our interdimensional framework. So there's the transient manifestation. Mothman was seen repeatedly for about 13 months, then never, at least in Point Pleasant, again. This ephemeral presence matches the idea of a powerful visit or a limited time breach between worlds. If it were an animal, one would expect either ongoing sightings, if it lived and bred there, or a carcass, if it died in the Silver Bridge collapse or thereafter. We have neither. Its vanishing act is consistent with an interdimensional traveler who completed its mission, whatever that was, and left. And then it has non-physical traits. There's no tangible evidence of Mothman was ever found. No feathers, droppings, or impact from bullets. Some reportedly shot at it to no effect. One could argue it was a bird mis-ID'd, but then one would expect a few hunters to have downed a very large bird over a year. None did. If interdimensional, perhaps it had a quasi-physical form, able to be seen and even to leave footprints. Some tracks were found in the TNT area, but not killable or capturable. Eyewitness accounts emphasize the eyes, red and glowing, like bicycle reflectors. Eye shine occurs in animals when light is reflected, but bright red continuous glow is unusual. Some owl species have reddish eye shine, but only when caught in light. Mothman's eyes glowed even in the dark woods, according to accounts. Glowing eyes are a classical hallmark of folkloric creatures and often symbolize a supernatural nature, ghosts and demons in stories of glowing eyes. In our Ish context, maybe the glowing eyes were an energy effect or a deliberately frightening visage chosen by the entity. Then there's ancillary phenomenon. As noted, Mothman's flap had abundant ancillary phenomena. UFO, interpreted by Ish as approximately the same phenomena in different forms, or as vehicles through a dimensional rift. Men in black, who were weird, dark-clothed strangers, threatening witnesses, which in Keel's view might themselves be ultra-terrestrial shapeshifters monitoring the situation. Precognitive dreams, several people, including reportedly Keel himself, dreamed of a bridge collapse or heard psychic messages hinting at it before it collapsed, or before it happened, suggesting some information leakage across time or dimension, and electrical oddities. People's phones and TVs acted strangely. These all align with the overall interdimensional disturbance in the area, as if a window was open that let in not just Mothman, but a suite of bizarre effects. Then there were meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. The timing with the tragedy suggests what Jung would call synchronicity, an acausal meaningful linkage. If Mothman were an interdimensional being, perhaps it specifically appeared to warn or observe the impending disaster. One Ish interpretation, entities that exist in a higher dimension might perceive our timeline differently. Maybe they knew the bridge was going to fail. Mothman could have been an envoy to study human reactions or subtly influence outcomes. Some witnesses claimed that encountering Mothman gave them a sense of dread that stopped them from going on the bridge at that time, arguably saving their lives. If true, that paints Mothman almost as a dimensional do-gooder, constrained from directly involving or intervening, but trying to nudge people away. Alternatively, more sinister takes cast it as causing the disaster or feeding on the fear energy. And then there's the post-event trajectory. After 1967, Mothman was gone from West Virginia. However, sporadic reports of similar flying humanoids globally raise the question, is it the same entity visiting different places, or a species from elsewhere that occasionally pops in? Notably, some claimed a Mothman-like figure was seen at other disasters, allegedly reported near Chernobyl in 1986, dubbed the Blackbird of Chernobyl. Though these reports are hard to verify, the pattern, if not folkloric retrofitting, would strongly imply an interdimensional agent concerned with catastrophic events. Sorry, folks, it's just a long day. Okay, that was a waste of time. Okay. All right, so Mothman's story strongly supports an Ish type explanation because the folkloric narrative and imperial strangeness both point away from the conventional. Even skeptics who debunk the eyewitness reliability can't deny that the legend took on a supernatural life. The interdimensional hypothesis almost becomes part of the legend itself, thanks to Keel. From a strict scientific angle, one might prefer a simple answer, or a simpler answer. It was just owls plus mass hysteria, but that fails to account for the UFO and MIB and psychic elements. It treats them as unrelated coincidences or exaggerations. The Ish, in contrast, provides a one-stop explanation. Everything was part of one grand phenomenon of cross-dimensional interaction. One must acknowledge, however, that the evidence for Mothman being real at all mostly rests on anecdotal accounts and Keel's somewhat sensational reporting, which some critics accuse of embellishment. If one steps back, an interdimensional interpretation of Mothman is only as credible as the underlying sightings and paranormal reports. For those inclined to believe the witnesses, Ish ties it together neatly. For those more skeptical, Ish might seem like making a myth even more mythic. Yet from a cultural perspective, the Mothman case shows how people naturally gravitate to an interdimensional type story to explain the unexplainable. It serves a narrative need, bridging occurrences in a purposeful way. For instance, Mothman came from beyond to warn us. It also fits the age-old template of messengers from the spirit world. In modern terms, the spirit world is reconceived as another dimension or parallel universe. The messenger becomes a cryptid rather than an angel, but structurally it's the same idea. Then there's other cryptids and window phenomena. Beyond Bigfoot and Mothman, countless other cryptids populate a global lore. While covering each in depth is beyond scope, it's worth examining a few brief examples to see how the interdimensional hypothesis might apply. All right, there's the chupacabra. Emerging in the mid-1990s in Puerto Rico, the chupacabra, or goatsucker, was described as a small creature that attacked and drained blood from livestock. Early reports depicted it with spiky back, alien-looking eyes, and a hopping gait, quite unearthly. Some initial theories even suggest an extraterrestrial origin, since the first wave of sightings coincided with a UFO flap on the island. Skeptics later concluded many chupacabra reports were mangy coyotes or dogs, especially the later sightings on the U.S. mainland, which described a canid form. But the original Puerto Rican chupacabra had more paranormal overtones. Witnesses spoke of it leaping 20 feet or vanishing and finding neatly punctured carcasses with all blood removed, something normal predators don't do. If we apply the ISH or Ish, chupacabra might have been a visitor from some weird zone, perhaps a lab created being slipping through a portal. Some locals favored a theory that it was an escaped U.S. government experiment, but that just relocates the mystery. Folklorist Benjamin Radford traced the chupacabra image to a movie Creature from Species that had aired in Puerto Rico, indicating a possible cultural source. However, even that raises the question, did collective belief conjure something into quasi-reality? In other words, did an interdimensional phenomenon latch onto the image circulating in people's minds? This touches on Jungian tulpa notions. Chupacabra, at least in its initial form, is a candidate for an Ish approach, particularly because there was no evolutionary precedent for such a creature in Puerto Rico, no native predators of that type. It came out of nowhere and has quickly disappeared by the 2000s, shifting into the debunkable mangy dog form. This suggests its true origin might lie in cultural, perhaps interdimensional realms rather than biological ones. Oh, excuse me. All right, then there are lake monsters. Loch Ness Monster of Scotland is often envisioned as a surviving plesiosaur, a relic of prehistory. That's the mainstream cryptozoology angle, but Nessie also has odd aspects, frequent appearances, then none for decades, and associated folklore of water kelpies, shape-shifting water spirits in Scottish lore. Some authors have whimsically suggested Nessie might be interdimensional, popping into our lock from some primordial or parallel realm. For instance, waves of sightings sometimes coincide with seismic activity in the area, leading to musings that fault lines could open windows. Ted Holliday's The Dragon and the Disc even postulated Nessie was a paranormal phenomenon connected with UFOs. Nessie's elusive body, no body, or clear sonar, despite much searching, keeps conventional explanations at bay, though most lean to misidentifications and hoaxes. An ish interpretation is probably a stretch here, but not inconceivable. Maybe Nessie is a projection of a Jungian archetype of the deep, or a traveler from a lost world bubble universe briefly entering ours. Such ideas remain on the fringe, even among cryptozoologists, but demonstrate that whatever evidence is skimpy and witnesses fervent interdimensional theories sprout as a way to rationalize an elusive reality. Then there's thunderbirds and sky beasts. American traditions speak of thunderbirds, gigantic birds, or feathered serpents associated with storms and lightning. In modern times, especially in the U.S. Midwest, there are sporadic reports of abnormally large flying creatures, some resembling pterosaurs. For instance, a famous 1977 case in Illinois where a boy claimed a giant bird picked him up and dropped him. There could be surviving pterosaurs or misidentified large eagles. However, the persistent motif of enormous flying creatures ties into archetypes of sky gods and dragons. One could entertain that some cryptid giant bird sightings might be momentary bleed-throughs of the archetypal images from the collective unconscious or parallel plane. The interdimensional idea isn't commonly applied to thunderbirds in literature, but logically it could be. If there is a domain of reality that native shamans access where thunder beings exist, perhaps occasionally one crosses to the physical realm where people physically see into that other realm, like visionary experience exteriorized. This blends spiritual and interdimensional concepts, effectively treating them as one. Then there are window areas, Skinwalker Ranch and others. Perhaps the most compelling situations for Ish are not single cryptids, but locations known for a variety of weird creatures and phenomena. Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, the Hoa Basiu Forest in Romania, and others are reputed hotspots. At Skinwalker Ranch, as we discussed, witnesses saw not only UFOs and poltergeists, but also cryptid-like creatures. Bigfoot-type figures, wolf-like beasts impervious to bullets, even hybrid chimera like a hyena with a human head, according to Navajo lore. The ranch's name itself comes from the Navajo concept of the skinwalker, a witch who can shapeshift, a concept blending physical and spirit worlds. Investigators Colm Kelleher and George Knapp in The Hunt for Skinwalker eventually surmised that the ranch was a portal area, essentially an interdimensional gateway allowing transient manifestations of all sorts. Their tone is quasi-scientific. Bigelow's NIDS team took measurements that ultimately they ended up with more questions than answers, entertaining the portal idea because no single case, alien, ghost, cryptid, sufficed. Such window areas are practically case studies for Ish themselves. They suggest some places might naturally have a thin veil between dimensions. Folklore around the world often designates certain spots as haunted or enchanted, where strange creatures or lights appear, fairy rings, sacred groves, etc. The modern spin is geomagnetic or wormhole conjectures to explain these geographical focals of weirdness. If any evidence could be gathered, like a measurable gravitational anomaly or a recurring pattern to the phenomenon, these places might one day provide more concrete support for Ish. As of now, they remain anecdotal wonderlands. Through these brief examples, we see that the interdimensional hypothesis serves as a kind of unifying theory for a wide range of unexplained creatures. It says perhaps none of these beings are native to our everyday reality. Instead, they hail from the outside, glimpsed in our world only in fleeting, puzzling episodes. It is a bold and broad claim, some would say a catch-all that risks explaining everything and hence explains nothing. Yet, in a scholarly exploration, it is valuable as a cross-cultural explanatory model. It connects modern paranormal research with age-old folk beliefs, the otherworld spirit incursions, and with cutting-edge physics ideas, the multiverse dimensions. In so doing, Though in doing so, it provides a vocabulary to discuss these mysteries interdisciplinary. A folklorist can speak of liminality while a physicist speaks of extra-dimensional space, and they might well be gesturing at the same concept from different angles. So the exploration of cryptids as interdimensional spillovers reveals a fertile intersection of legend, philosophy, and speculative science. In this discussion, we evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the interdimensional hypothesis, address critical perspectives, and consider its implications for both research and our broader understanding of unexplained phenomena. There's the integrative power of the hypothesis. One of the primary strengths of the interdimensional spillover idea is its integrative explanatory power. It offers a single conceptual framework that can accommodate disparate paranormal phenomena under one roof. A scenario like the Mothman Flap, which involved cryptid sightings, UFO, psychic experiences, and folkloric elements, can be interpreted cohesively rather than as a hodgepodge of unrelated occurrences. This holistic view resonates with the approach of thinkers like Jacques Vallée, who urged that UFOs, cryptids, and occult phenomena be studied together as they may be different manifestations of a singular underlying reality. The ISH essentially heeds this call. It posits a unified field of Forteana: Bigfoot, Mothman, Chupacabras, spirits, fairies, aliens, potentially all part of the same continuum of interdimensional entities. For researchers frustrated by the siloing of disciplines, ufology versus cryptozoology versus parapsychology, the hypothesis encourages cross-pollination. Folklore studies already point out thematic overlaps between, say, fairy abductions and alien abductions, or between werewolf legends and modern dogman sightings. Ish provides a theoretical backbone to those overlaps by suggesting these are not mere analogies, but literal common origin events interpreted differently across eras. Alignment with folklore and tradition. The hypothesis garners support from its alignment with traditional worldviews. Nearly every culture has some belief in other realms and beings that traverse them, be it spirits, demons, jinn, or mythic creatures. The Ish might just be a scientific seeming rebranding of that worldview. This could be viewed in two ways: positively, as traditional knowledge was onto something real, or skeptically, as modern people are reviving superstition under the guise of dimensions. Regardless, the continuity of ideas is notable. When native elders say Bigfoot is a spirit that moves between worlds, and quantum-minded cryptozoologists say Bigfoot is interdimensional, one hears an echo across supposed science-spirit divide. For anthropology and folklore, this is a fascinating case of convergence of knowledge systems. It suggests the human narratives of the others have perhaps always grappled with the same unknown, just described in different languages. The metaphysical language of centuries is morphing into the physics jargon of today. Some scholars, for instance, Jeffrey Kripal, as cited in the IDH Wikipedia, note that paranormal lore often reframes itself in terms of the dominant metaphors of the time. Once theological, later technological, now interdimensional. This doesn't automatically invalidate it. It may simply be evolution of explanatory metaphor. The ISH then could be seen as a modern mythology in the making, or perhaps a step toward a legitimate new science that acknowledges domains beyond the observable. Then there's scientific plausibility and challenges. From a strict scientific vantage, the interdimensional cryptid idea faces substantial hurdles. While theoretical physics allows for extra dimensions and universes, we currently have zero experiential or experimental evidence that macroscopic travel between them is possible. Wormholes remain speculative. To our knowledge, no particle has been observed disappearing into an unseen dimension or returning. Thus, invoking these concepts to explain cryptids might be seen as extremely premature and bordering on pseudoscience. Critics would argue ISH is unfalsifiable. Any absence of evidence for cryptids is explained away by they went back into their dimension, which is not a testable statement. Furthermore, ISH sometimes leans on a God of the gap style reasoning. We can't find Bigfoot in the woods, so let's put him in another dimension, a gap in our understanding that conveniently shields him from scrutiny. This is a valid philosophical critique. For the ISH to gain scientific credibility, it would need to make bold predictions that can be checked. For instance, it might predict that during cryptid encounters, specific physical anomalies should be measurable: radiation spikes, gravitational fluctuations, etc. Some attempts were made at Skinwalker Ranch, for instance, where they did measure radiation spikes during events. If those could be replicated and correlated reliably with sightings, it hints at an objective phenomena requiring explanation. Another challenge is Occam's razor. The simplest explanation for cryptid stories, skeptics say, is not that beings pop in from alternate realities, but that humans are error-prone and storytelling creatures. Misidentifications, hoaxes, hallucinations, and cultural narratives can together account for cryptid lore without invoking new physics. The interdimensional hypothesis is complex and extraordinary. It multiplies entities and realms. Therefore, according to Occam's principle, it would only be warranted if the simpler explanation fails to account for numerous observations. Proponents would claim that indeed the volume and consistency of certain reports, for instance, footprints at end, simultaneous UFO and cryptid cases, etc., to defy simpler explanation and thus necessitating a more extraordinary hypothesis. This is debatable and likely will remain so until or unless a cryptid can be studied under controlled conditions, which under ISH might be never. By their near nature, they resist control. Then there are cultural and psychological implications. Accepting an interdimensional reality has profound implications for human self-conception. It would mean our universe is just one of many, and that perhaps intelligence and life exist in forms that occasionally intersect with us. This would be as paradigm shifting as accepting extraterrestrial visitation, perhaps even more so. It blurs the line between material and spiritual. Interestingly, many who pursue these topics find themselves moving away from a strictly materialist world toward one that entertains consciousness or information as fundamental. If cryptids can appear and disappear, are they perhaps constructs of consciousness? Are they real in the sense of physical or something in between? John Keel at times suggested ultra-terrestrials could manipulate human perception directly, implying the phenomenon might be as much about mind and belief as about external reality. The ISH therefore invites interdisciplinary research between physics, psychology, and even religious studies. It's a space where a Jungian analysis and a quantum physicist might find common cause in exploring how reality might not be a fixed monolithic thing, but layered or plural. Then there's ethical and investigative considerations. If one takes ISH seriously, how would investigators proceed differently than with a traditional cryptid hunt? For one, the focus might shift from trying to capture a specimen to monitoring environments for anomalies. We would treat hotspots like labs, deploying instruments for electromagnetic, gravitational, and dimensional indicators. For instance, experiments with atomic clocks to see if time dilation occurs, or lasers to detect space-time distortions. One might also take witnesses even more seriously. If consciousness or expectation could influence or gate these phenomena, perhaps witness involvement in experiments like intention-based protocols. So, for instance, meditation or ritual to invite phenomena, as done in some UFO contact groups, might become part of research. This is fringe from a normal science perspective, but it's precisely what some bold researchers are doing. The SD method, or CE5 in ufology, for instance, is essentially a conscious experiment to invite UFOs. For cryptids, there haven't been as many attempts at psychic communication, though a few claim telepathic contact with Sasquatch. It's controversial and easily derided. Yet, if interdimensional beings exist, it's plausible they might use modes of communication beyond just the physical, perhaps influencing thoughts or dreams. Thus, the methodology to study them might need to include the subjective and not just the objective. This is an uncomfortable territory for science, but also for anthropology or religious studies, who often examine subjective experiences as data and cultural context. A truly interdisciplinary approach can emerge here, albeit one walking a tightrope between open mind inquiry and maintaining rigor. The cryptids as interdimensional hypothesis stands at the fringes of both science and folklore, a meeting point of cutting-edge theoretical imagination and ancient narrative instincts. Its value might not necessarily lie in being the correct explanation, but in pushing us to broaden our framework of inquiry. By entertaining it, researchers are forced to break silos, to consider human experiences in their totality, both physical and psychological, and to confront the limitation of our current paradigms. Even if ultimately cryptids turn out to be mere myth or misidentified animals, the exercise of examining ISH has merit has merit as a thought experiment and encourages an attitude that not all unknowns must fit pre-existing categories of known science. Historically, paradigm shifts like meteorites being rocks from the sky, or ball lightning, or microscopic germs causing disease required expanding notions of reality. Could interdimensional entities be another such expansion? At the moment, it remains a highly speculative hypothesis with a mix of anecdotal support and theoretical scaffolding. The next steps, if one were to advocate advances seriously, would be collecting qualitative, repeatable evidence of anomalies associated with cryptid events, something which organizations like Project Hizdalan for Unexplained Lights have attempted in the UFO realm. Until then, the ISH will likely function best as a mythological or philosophical lens, a way to interpret the rich tapestry of human encounters with the unknown that respects both the experiential reality of witnesses and the mysteries that continue to elude conventional explanation. Oh, good Lord. So in conclusion, cryptids have always occupied a liminal space at the fringes of the known, hovering between the real and the unreal. The hypothesis that these elusive entities might be the result of interdimensional spillover is a testament to our enduring impulse to explain the unexplainable by expanding reality's boundaries. In this this podcast, we have journeyed through folklore, metaphysics, and physics to explore this bold idea. Along the way, we have seen that what might initially sound like science fiction, creatures popping in and out of other dimensions, in fact, echoes motifs from ancient myths and finds tentative support in modern theoretical science. From a folklore perspective, framing cryptids as interdimensional beings richly contextualizes them among the world's repository of supernatural narratives. Bigfoot becomes more than a reclusive ape. He acquires the aura of a guardian spirit of the wilderness, slipping between the material world and the spirit world, as many native legends already suppose. Mothman transforms from a regional oddity into a classic omen-bearing otherworldly messenger akin to the winged demons or angels of lore, only described in the idiom of UFOs and parallel universes. This interpretive shift does not diminish the cultural reality of these creatures, rather it enriches it, linking modern sightings to age-old human experiences of the other. It validates the experiential truth of witnesses in a novel framework. Those who claim I saw Bigfoot vanish or I felt a presence not of this world are no longer dismissed outright, but their testimony is reinterpreted as a possible interaction with an overlapping reality. Folklore studies remind us that even if interdimensional cryptids were to remain unproven, the very act of believing in them serves a deep function, recapturing wonder, articulating fears and hopes, and perhaps subconsciously protesting a worldview that considers everything knowable and under control. In this sense, the interdimensional hypothesis is as much about us, about human yearning for mystery and meaning, as it is about monsters. Through the lens of metaphysics and philosophy, we grapple with what interdimensionality implies. If cryptids hail from elsewhere, what kind of elsewhere? We found that spiritual and philosophical traditions worldwide have long toyed with the idea of parallel planes of existence. Whether framed as the astral plane, the world of forms, or a parallel universe in the multiverse, the concept suggests our perceivable reality is just a slice of a much grander cosmos. In entertaining cryptids as interdimensional, we flirt with a more pluralistic ontology. Reality is a multiverse of intersecting domains, some perhaps inhabited by intelligences that gave rise to our legends of gods, spirits, and yes, monsters. This raises intriguing questions about the nature of our existence and consciousness. Are Bigfoot and Mothman crossing into our dimension physically, or are they projections into our consciousness from a deeper reality? Could they be what Carl Jung might call archetypes taking external form? The interdimensional hypothesis forces us to confront the possibility that the strict materialism underpinning mainstream science might be too narrow to account for all human experience. It invites dialogue between scientists, philosophers, and mystics on what the real encompasses. While this hypothesis might not yet have empirical proof, it serves as a thought experiment in expanding our metaphysical horizons, much as discussions of multiple universes have expanded cosmology's scope without direct evidence so far. From the standpoint of physics, we balance on the edge of the known and speculative unknown. Physics readily provides the terminology of higher dimensions, wormholes, and multiverses, leading to a veneer of scientific plausibility to ideas that used to be solely the province of fantasy. We saw that theories like brain cosmology and quantum mechanics, many worlds interpretation, already countenance hidden dimensions and parallel outcomes. No laws of physics outright forbid the notion of dimensional travel. They merely demonstrate it would require conditions, energy, technology, control of space-time far beyond our current capabilities. If one day science develops a theory of everything that unites mind and matter or discovers evidence of other universes bumping against ours, the interdimensional hypothesis might migrate from fringe to frontier. Until then, it remains a speculative bridge. However, even as speculation, it has a heuristic value. By asking what physical effects would an interdimensional visit have, researchers have been prompted to gather more instrumentation during paranormal investigations, leading to documentation of odd electromagnetic readings, radiation spikes, or other data that could, in time, coalesce into patterns. Should those patterns emerge, we might then have the initial seeds of a scientific case that something objective underlies at least some cryptid encounters, something that might indeed hint at a leak in our fabric's reality, or our reality's fabric. Assessing our case studies through this interdisciplinary prism, we find Bigfoot and Mothman exemplify both the promise and challenge of the interdimensional thesis. Bigfoot's unresolved status after decades of search, despite footprints and eyewitnesses, is explicable under ISH, an explanation that simultaneously resolves and complicates. It resolves why Bigfoot evades capture. He's not always here, but complicates by positing an invisible portal or other realm for which evidence is tenuous. Mothman's intense but brief manifestation, culminating in a tragic synchronicity, is almost archetypal for an interdimensional narrative. It left no body, only stories, and a mystery that is elevated to legend. If one is inclined to believe Keel and the populace of Point Pleasant, something very strange indeed visited that town. ISH says it might have been a cross-worlds traveler, not unlike the angels of Lot, or the Valkyries deciding who lives and dies. Grand comparisons, yes, but mythically, Mothman has assumed that status in West Virginian lore. In turning cryptids into interdimensional beings, we inevitably cast ourselves, humanity, in a different light. We become perhaps not the sole intelligent observers in the cosmos, but one species among others, peering through the cracks of a grand multi-layer reality. Our relationship with these cryptids would then be akin to the villager's relationship with the fairies and folklore, uneasy, fleeting, tinged with awe and dread. It humbles us with the reminder that we may not have dominion over or even full awareness of all that moves in the world. For the scientific establishment, embracing such a view would require a paradigm shift as dramatic as any in its history. Whether that will happen depends on evidence we may or may not gather in the future. For the time being, the interdimensional hypothesis remains a synthesis of knowledge and imagination, a conjecture that invites us to keep an open yet critical mind. In conclusion, exploring cryptids as interdimensional spillover is a multidisciplinary adventure that, regardless of one's ultimate stance on the hypothesis, yields value by connecting dots across fields that too rarely intersect. It challenges our epistemology. How do we know what we know, and how could some truth slip through our usual nets of perception? It honors human experiences that science has often marginalized by proposing they may be telling us something real, albeit in an unanticipated language. And it stirs the spirit of wonder, that vital spark that lies at the heart of both scientific inquiry and the love of lore. Should future research provide even a glimmer of confirmation for the interdimensional hypothesis, the implications would be staggering, rewriting textbooks and theology books alike. But even if that day never comes, the hypothesis serves as a bridge between worlds in its own right, a bridge between the world of tangible reality and the world of human meaning-making. Cryptids, those tantalizing phantoms on the edge of our maps, continue to remind us that not all boundaries are yet drawn, perhaps not even the boundary between the seen and unseen. In entertaining the possibility that those boundaries themselves can be crossed, we keep alive the essential truth that discovery is not over. There may indeed be more things in heaven and earth that are dreamt of in our philosophy. The interdimensional spillover hypothesis invites us to dream a little more, to question a little deeper, and to stand ready for surprises as vast as the multiverse. Whew. That was rough. That was real rough. All right, let's I'm going to have to race through these comments, folks. So let me see how. Let's give me a quick second. Let's see how things are going. Oosh. That's kind of meh. All right. So let's just go through these comments. Oh, my Lord. All right, here we go. My apologies. I'm literally going to have to race through these. Mitch Sandman says Bigfoot. Interesting. Monica Wiggs is saying, I had an experience with the Cherokee Nunnehi in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. Interesting. Mitch Salmon says, I wonder if Trump will take over. Yeah, I like scans. She's like already talking shit about Colombia already. Okay. All right. My apologies, people. I got a lot of work to do, so interesting. So Justin Miller is saying iPhone needs a thermal and green phosphorus lens option to capture these phenomena as ball lightning. I bet you can buy like an extension somewhere. I bet you it's possible. Fairies are still kicking. So Mark Frey saying there's a recent UFO Chronicles podcast of a guy who is into fairies and had an encounter with a very small flying fairy. This is around 340 or somewhere near there. It is not a throwback. Interesting. I heard they're light being, maybe plasma entities that can also materialize them out. Mitch, that's certainly possible. Huh. A 2D grid, height with no depth, on Salt Spring Island. Interesting, Tim Beck says. Yeah, exactly. They are real, but what are they? It's a morale boost we needed, Justin said. Huh. Oh, so episode 362 on the UFO Chronicles podcast. Ugh. Ugh. Hey, Spider Bite. Yeah, my apologies. I'm just trying to race through these because I have like 5 minutes left. Okay, so Justin Miller says Saint Benedict metal will keep the white cloud out if you hang it on your door dome. Just saying. Hey, Heidi Go. Thank you very much. Coming from, why is the? Sorry, that's why my camera was shaking because the light source was like. It probably looked like I was like. Anyway, welcome Heidi from Boulder, Colorado. Samurai Pizza Cats. Yeah, then you yeah, coffee time. What's this? Again, forgive me, folks. I'm just trying to race through these things. Yeah, I'm tired. I had an early morning and like late night, and I had 2 weeks off from work, so I've like been busier than ever trying to get as much. I finished all of January. All my January episodes are done, and I've already recorded 3 episodes into February, and then I have 2 more to record tomorrow. Um, but I haven't had a chance to. I only was able to complete and upload 1 episode in February, so I'm just trying to get ahead of everything because it's just. And then, like I said, I have a novel that I have to. I'm trying to publish by the end of January, so I'm working on that too today and tomorrow. Yeah, I do have buy me a coffee. It's I don't I think it's in the yeah I think it's in the links in the description somewhere. I can make AI, Sean. Actually, I do have the techno. I do have like I only get to make one though. Um, but we'll see. Maybe I can do that. Okay. Whew. Should be talking more, but I like I said, I've been doing a lot of reading tonight. That's just who knows who knows what it is. Pseudophysics. Who knows? I know I'm getting busy. Pseudo Venezuela. Yeah, that's actually Stephen. Why am I blanking? Um, Stephen M. Why am I basically has said that. Huh. Peasants were not allowed to bear arms until Americans came along. Give AI some time, it could be a great island in the future, Justin Miller says. Oh, man. Ugh. A Mothman feather on eBay? Does that even exist? Hey, Chile Jalal, good to see you. Yeah. Mm, okay, that's what I thought. We're good. Oof. Interesting. So Roger Claiborne is saying, go into any woods midday, they seem scarcely inhabited. Spend the night in one or walk the trails at night, and all kinds of things roaming about, some really big. Interesting. Yeah, I did that. I had like a strange urge to go out into the park, and on the way back, I like nearly walked into a great horned owl. It's just like up on a branch, just like sitting there. I mean, I could just see his silhouette. It was so dark, but I got close. DMT-Ls are real. That I was bouncing nervously. Yeah, it was. I have a key light, and it's not super stable. So sometimes it was falling onto this uh, webcam, and the webcam is it'll move. Like if I go like this or something like that, sometimes it'll move. No, in fact, I got an issue with it right now. There we go. Okay. I've thought about that too, Tim. Like, it could just be thought forms. Oh, yeah, I'm like, we're way over. They are endless. Good Lord. I haven't. Gray House asked if I caught the latest as presented by Jon Stewart. Is about it. Yeah, I've just been like literally just cranking the entire, like I worked on Christmas. Like I like every single day, 12, 15-hour days, just trying to get ahead before work started it back again. Oops. Oh, welcome, Sovereign Cosmic Wildman. But yeah, I do. Yeah, well, most. Sometimes I cycle very quickly if somebody is not nice. Because everybody who makes a comment here is a subscriber. So I. Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying I think it's a potential theory. Because they all kind of collapse into orbs and appear and disappear, have physical form. Yeah, I appreciate that, Sovereign. Yeah. By the way, the reason I routinely like require people to be subscribers to comment is because YouTube frequently unsubscribes them, and it's a mechanism for me to, prevent the channel from just falling off the earth. Shut it down. Okay. All right. Woo. You know what? I should have put this up anyway. Let's throw that on there. All right, folks. I am very tired and I have a lot of work to do. So, anyway, thank you all. Happy New Year. Good to see everybody. And, oh, yeah, I've been 20,000 plus subs since like November. But then it suddenly immediately declined. Not declined, but it like immediately decelerated. Okay. All right. Happy New Year. Good night. God bless. See everyone next week. Or actually, yeah, next week. Good night, everyone.